Shalom. Welcome to Mwanga Radio. My name is Ben Ambani. This is Raising the Standard of Worship show. In this show, we equip worship leaders to be more like Christ. Today, we're gonna talk about why worship has become shallow. Why worship has become shallow. People my age or people who are older than me can attest to this. There is something that this generation is missing. I remember when I was growing up, when we were in high school, we had these meetings which were called Weekend Challenge. Weekend Challenge were meetings which could involve pastors together with worship leaders from different areas just coming to a school for a weekend, either Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'm telling you, these meetings were so powerful. I remember there's a friend of mine I met who told me that he had stolen shirts for Form 1 and Form 2. He had that bad behavior. You know the way when a new Form 1 comes, someone is stealing a shirt or a t-shirt or something. And during a weekend challenge, this guy says he felt the power of God upon him till he took about 8 shirts and took them to the altar, crying before God, because the power and the presence of God was evident in that particular meeting. To be honest, there is something we are missing in this generation that was there before. The people then might not have been good and tight musically the way this generation of today is, but there is something they knew that this generation does not know. And this brings us to our question: why has worship become shallow? Why has worship become shallow? Point number 1, we're saying that the church has been influenced by the world's standards. Today, things are being done differently. And the same way the world is doing things, there's that pressure. You see churches are struggling to do things the way the world is doing. Leave alone churches, even worship leaders. You realize that worship leaders nowadays, they want to dress exactly the same way the musicians of the world are dressing. If they do short dresses, worship leaders want to do short dresses. If they do different haircuts, the way the world is doing, people are trying to copy. Talk about recruitment. The same way a pub will recruit musician or a musician is the same way the church is recruiting musicians. Today, we are focusing more on the talent and the skill, because a pub only needs a skilled musician, because there's some result which they want to achieve is excellence in music. Now, when it comes to church, today you find people recruiting a gifted musician. Whether he's born again or is not born again, that's not the issue. As long as we have people who are talented in skill and they can achieve excellence, that's all. I have no problem with excellence, but I have a problem in us copying the standards of the world. Look at what the Bible says in Romans chapter 12. It says, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all He has done for you. Let them be a living and a holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable." Then it says, "This is truly the way to worship Him." Look at number 2, verse 2. It says, "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. But it says, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Now, we've got to do things differently. We are the people who need to set the standard. We are the people who need to set the standard. We are not supposed to use what the world is using. We need to see what is it that the Bible says, and that is the way we need to do it. Worship has become shallow. You can agree with me. I know you can agree with me. And that's why we're saying point number 2, that the reason why worship has become shallow is because we have limited worship to music. We have limited worship to music. It is true that music is a good tool that helps us to glorify God in worship. But the truth is, it is not the only way to worship God. When we limit music, when we limit worship to music, we are basically saying that probably people who are not musicians are not worshipers. Now, how many people do you know who are true worshipers and they're not musicians? If we go to the Bible, maybe just a few musicians, maybe David, because he was a musician and a worshiper at the same time. Asaph. I have read the Bible, but I don't know whether it is in the Bible, but I've not come across a place where Abraham was carrying a guitar or a harp or playing an instrument. But Abraham was a true worshiper. In fact, the father of faith. Abraham was a person who was able even to sacrifice his own son. In fact, the Bible says his only son. In verse 22 of Genesis, in chapter 22 of Genesis, it says, and after these things, God tested Abraham and said to Abraham, Abraham, he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him. Abraham was a person who paid the price. He was ready to sacrifice Isaac. He was ready to sacrifice Isaac, his only son. Look at verse number 5. It says, and Abraham said to his young men, stay here with me, with the donkey, sorry. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. Worship is a sacrifice. Abraham is willing to pay the price, is willing to sacrifice to worship God. So when we limit worship to music, we have missed it. We have missed it. How many musicians do you have in your church? Does it mean that the entire congregation is a congregation of musicians? So it is wrong to limit worship to music. Point number 3 of why worship has been shallow. We are building musicians instead of building believers. We are building musicians instead of building believers. What should come first? The truth is, you need to be first a believer, a musician second. Or if you are born again, if you are a musician before you got born again, that's okay. But now, where do we need to place our effort? If you meet a pastor, most of them will tell you, I'm being disturbed by this musician. Oh, my musician has an issue. There are character issues. But what are we doing? You recruited the wrong person and you're expecting good results from the wrong person. You didn't consider whether this guy is born again or not. You have not trained them and you're expecting them to have character. We are living in a generation whereby musicians are treating pastors like bosses. Church is about employment. And so your pastor is your boss. Now, you deal with your pastor the way you deal with your bosses. If they tell you payment will delay, you deal with the pastor. Some musicians even beat pastors. I'm not saying it is wrong to pay musicians. It is okay to pay musicians. But there is a big difference. You find musicians who don't have the heart of ministry at hand. You find musicians who are well gifted in skill, but they're spiritually empty. We need to be deliberate about this. I have always said that we need to have systems whereby we ensure that every member of a worship team is growing spiritually. If you meet people, they will tell you once the musicians have played music, they go out. They don't listen to sermons. They don't even believe in what the pastors are preaching and saying. Now, when will these people grow? When will they find time to grow spiritually? There's someone who made a joke. He said, if Jesus came on a Sunday, don't be surprised to find out that musicians in church who had led worship will be left. You can imagine. Because the hearts of these musicians are far away. Now, who is to blame between the pastors and the worship leaders? I will say both, because if you're a sober pastor, you will understand that you need to build the character in your musicians. You need to build their way of spiritual life. You have to be intentional about their spiritual growth. On the other hand, you also see, for example, you've hired a musician just because he's skilled and you didn't consider the character. When this musician is coming, demanding wherever he demands, or messing up with the entire worship team, you're the one who brought the wrong person. If you don't know the right person, if you don't know the right way to recruit the right people, you'll always get the wrong ones. What are we saying? We need to be deliberate about discipling musicians in the things and matters of faith. We need to have a balance in building the musicianship and the spiritual aspect. Because if we don't build a balance, you will find imbalanced. Either you're not good in skill, or you're not good when it comes to matters of faith. There has to be a balance in this. I believe you've been blessed in this show. Today we've talked about three things that we've talked about three reasons of why worship has been shallow. We've said the church has been influenced by the world standards. And number two, we've said we have limited worship to music. And the last point, we have said we are building musicians instead of building believers. If you don't have a proper structure of recruiting the right people, you will always get the wrong ones. I believe you've enjoyed the show today. We're looking forward to see you in our next production. God bless you so much. We love you. Share this video. Invite a worship leader somewhere. We love you so much. God bless you.